Hello, and welcome back to The Collector's Corner, the podcast that demystifies art collecting with me, Antonia Piersanti. I am so excited for this first episode of 2026 with a very special guest. Today, I'm speaking with the incredibly charming Carrie Scott in her London home the day after her return from Art Basel, Miami. Well known in art circles, Carrie is an American English curator and trained art historian who started her career in Seattle 16 years ago and has since worked with many galleries, businesses, collectors, and artists all over the world. Carrie is also an entrepreneur. In 2024, she launched Scene, SEEN, a next generation art consultancy and amazing platform that helps collectors, artists, and all art lovers to understand and navigate the art world with confidence. I highly recommend you check it out. And of course, Carrie's own wonderful collection fills her entire home. Now, I know that my baseline premise with this podcast is to highlight collectors who are not art world professionals. But the reason I wanted to make an exception with Carrie is because of her dedication to breaking down barriers. She really works from inside the system to pull more people in, and her insights are captivating. Together, we talk about how hyper financialization broke the value exchange in the art world, the importance of protecting our creative health, especially in today's polarized society, and her pro tips on what people should know before they start collecting. We covered a lot with Carrie, and I could have gone on forever. So I'll stop here and let you enjoy our conversation. All the references are, as usual, in the show notes. Carrie, thank you so much for joining me
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
and for welcoming me in your home. So really happy to be here. So you wear many hats. You do a lot of things. You're very busy,
Just a few, just one or two.
but you're a trained art historian, right? And you started your career working in galleries
Yeah.
in New York. Is that right?
Seattle.
Seattle.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you studied in Seattle and then started working in New York, but you also
Working.
okay.
So part of the many hats started there because when I was in grad school, I was fortunate enough to start writing for like the Seattle newspapers. So the Seattle Times, it was letting me run like sort of bi-weekly column. I did some things for The Stranger, which was like an indie newspaper as well. And then I started running, or I did an internship with this amazing couple who were collectors. And they put me up for a position to run a nonprofit at Seattle University. I was at the University of Washington, but Seattle U had done this like tiny little gallery space that was basically just a single wall in this like big glass building. And so I started doing that. And then I met James Harris, who had a gallery in downtown Seattle, and somehow convinced him that he needed a full-time assistant. So by the end of my time in Seattle, I was running the nonprofit. I was director of James Harris Gallery, and then I was also writing for the newspapers. And I just loved like doing all the things. And so actually New York was kind of tricky in terms of the transition from being able to have sort of breadth and depth to what I was doing to then just being, I was a sales director. So it was like, your job is to sell, and that's it. Like
the gallery in New York.
Yeah.
That you didn't enjoy.
I just found it difficult. Like I just, it's not the way my brain works. That being said, I absolutely love selling stuff, but I love doing it in a really kind of holistic way.
I think it's interesting though that you say that because you're an entrepreneur too, right? You worked for galleries and for other people, but you decided to launch your own practice, and that involves also, selling, bringing people on board. So what is it that you feel is different then, selling for a gallery versus you in your own practice, Carrie Scott and Partners, now Scene, and we'll get to that later. How do you feel that's different?
It's so funny. It wasn't until like 2 years ago that actually a client said to me, "You're an entrepreneur." And I was like, "No, I'm not. I just started my own business." And I do see them slightly differently Now that we've launched Scene, I'm like, oh no, maybe I am an entrepreneur. I sort of get it. But I just started the business, I mean, almost out of duress, right? I wasn't enjoying the job in New York. I was running this amazing gallery. At the time, I was working with, I mean, the best artists at that gallery. So Adam McEwen, Rashid Johnson, Mika Rottenberg, Matt Day Jackson. I mean, and on and on and on, right? Old people now who have huge, giant blue chip careers. And our team was amazing. M- My boss was pretty tricky and was very much like, no, 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 you are sales, 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 sales. And if you're not kind of producing sales, there was no point in being there. But it was also 2008, 2009. So I moved in May. I moved back to New York in May of 2008. And obviously, like financially, the world fell apart. And so in the following June, she was like last one in, first one out. So I was laid off and tried for a while to get another job in a gallery, but like that wasn't happening in New York, right? No one was hiring. I had a shot at a tiny gallery in, where was it? In Nantucket. But I was like, I'm not moving to Nantucket. This is crazy. So honestly, I was like, what else am I going to do? I better just try and like hustle and do some projects and see what works. And it wasn't like overnight, but it did become pretty clear that like special projects or pop-ups might work. So I did a little like teeny tiny thing with Rag and Bone. I think they paid me like $500 to put some photography in one of their spaces. Then we did another tiny partnership with W Magazine. And like it just inched into a business. Like there was zero plan. I then announced to my parents that I was starting my own business and they were like, sorry, don't you still have student debt? And I was like, yeah, but I don't have a husband and I don't have a mortgage and I don't have kids and I'm 28. So like, and there's no other option out there. Like, what am I going to do? I think we can figure this out. So the business kind of, it just evolved into a thing that has worked without much of a plan, which is really ironic because then I started giving artists like blueprints for success. So I'd start working with artists and kind of reverse engineer where they wanted to get to, but never did it for myself or the business at all, which is why I don't feel, or I didn't feel particularly entrepreneurial because it was just like, oh, we're making enough money to hire someone else. Great. Let's do that. Or, oh, we've just been asked to curate a show in Seoul. Sure. Let's do that. It was just following my nose a bit. And I loved like that part. I do love.
Yeah.
I like the puzzle of figuring things out. That's great.
To the point that now in 2024, you launched another entrepreneurial project, Scene. You describe it as the next generation art consultancy. And the goal is to bring more transparency, accessibility, meaningful engagement to the art world for both artists and collectors. Obviously, that resonates a lot with me and what I'm trying to do with the podcast. And so a question I had is you mentioned your entrance into the art world in Seattle through your studies and then the work you started doing there. So, and you don't come from an arty family or art collecting family.
Mm-mm.
So you step into this world that's often, perceived as elitist. How did it feel then for you? And how's your relationship to that world evolved over time?
That's a great question. So yes, I absolutely did not come from an art background. My mother was a psychoanalyst. Both my stepdad and my real dad finance guys. My dad had his own business being a financial advisor. And like they'd take us to museums as I think more like, well, that's what we should do. And I just always loved it. I loved making art, right? So like all through high school, I was like, oh, I'll be an artist. Like that's my kind of avenue. I wasn't particularly academic. I was like good at school, but not great at school. I then got into this liberal arts college in Pennsylvania where both my parents were like, sorry, we are not paying, I think it was 40 grand a year at that point for you to do a fine art degree. Like that's not happening. You can minor in fine art, go for it. But like, No, you need
Okay.
a proper degree. So I landed on English, which I think is hilarious because I don't see how that was going to get me much further than
Yeah,
a
great.
fine art degree. But that somehow seemed fine for them. They were like, okay, fine, go for it. And what was great about the school, it was a teeny school. So there's sort of 2,000 kids, unbelievable professors. If they saw any sort of aptitude, they would really push you. So I had this one professor who I talk about all the time called Thomas Reed, who he pulled me in halfway through freshman year and was like, You're doing fine in this class, but like you're coasting.
Yeah.
And that might be fine for you, but I don't want you to ever take my class again." And I was like,
Wow.
and I was a bit entitled. I sat there looking at him being like, "You can't say that to me. Like my parents are paying for me to be here." And he was like, "No, I can. I don't want to see you again until you're ready to try." But it somehow resonated and kicked my ass into gear. So by the end of university, I'd had enough credits to triple major in English, fine art, and art history. And it was extraordinary because it really opened my ability to like look became more interesting to me than my ability to make things. Like I loved dissecting what an artwork was. And so right out of school, I got this amazing job at Condé Nast, which they were just starting their sort of web stuff. So I got this big job in New York. It was amazing. And I realized this is long-winded, but I'm going to get to the point. It was amazing. I had this like big job in a huge publishing house. I was like, I've made it. Like I'm 21 years old. I'm living in New York and I'm on the like corporate ladder at Condé Nast. Like I'm going to be a writer. This is great.
So at that point, you wanted to become a writer, not a
not an art
artist.
historian, not an artist, not I realized I was good at like dissecting
the
things.
analytical part.
Yeah.
Okay. But you wanted to write about art?
Well, not yet.
Okay.
So one of the perks of being at Condé Nast was that you had membership to every museum in New York. So the Whitney, MoMA, you name it, the Guggenheim. It was like an employee benefit, which is so cool. And obviously also a bit broke at the same time, right? I was making no money and living in New York. And so the options to us were like, do you go to a bar and spend the paycheck that you don't really have? Or like, do you do like late night at the Whitney? And pretty quickly it seemed obvious to me that choosing the Whitney was a much better thing for me. But then on top of that, this was 2001. So September 11th happened. And honestly, those museums became like my churches. So I'd go every weekend. I'd go to every late night thing. It was like restorative. And to say that sounds trite, but like I really mean it. There was a Gerhard Richter show that I think I went like 18, 19 times. So much so that a security guard asked me, he was like, "Are you studying art or do you work in art? Like, why are you here all the time?" And I was like, "Because I'm kind of broken and sad and this makes me feel better. Like, I don't know why I'm here." And it was honestly like a few months after that that I thought, oh, actually, art does make me feel better. Maybe I should like do this as a career.
Yeah.
And so a bit like starting my business, it was like out of duress that I was like, I know, I'm going to go to grad school.
Yeah.
And I'll do an art history degree so that I can write about travel from an art perspective, get enough of the degree to be like, I am an authority now. I can
I was
talk
going to
about
say, you
this.
didn't feel like you were authoritative enough yet to write about art at that point, even though you had minored in fine art and art history.
Not at all. And some of that was that corporate environment makes you feel very, very small. And I mean, it was super cutthroat. Like I had watched two bosses get fired. I was like moving up the ladder, but it didn't feel like a safe place to be. And so I was like, oh, maybe if I went and got the master's, then I'm a bit more bulletproof.
But you didn't come back.
And then I didn't go back.
Yeah.
No.
How was it then transitioning into the art world?
Well, and so right to your point there, the best part was ending up in Seattle. So I had applied to schools in New York, I had applied to schools in London, and I'm so glad that I didn't end up going or staying in like a major city, because Seattle was, you could really be ambitious, I guess, right? So, and you could ask people, like, your access to unbelievable collectors and unbelievable collections was unparalleled. Like, it just wouldn't have happened if you were in New York. Whereas in Seattle, you could be like, oh, can I borrow your Rauschenberg? So I didn't have that, like, art world kind of elitist, gate kept. Like, that was not my experience of the art world. I
Yeah.
had this really wonderfully inclusive Seattle experience where, you were talking to the owners of galleries, you were meeting the artists who were at the top, you were working with the best collectors. It, it wasn't until New York that I realized there was this other side of the art world that was really like, you have a role, stay in your role. You don't understand something, don't ask questions. Like, just do what you're told.
Did it come as a bit of a shock then at the time?
Massively.
Yeah.
Massively. And people tried to warn me. They were like, the New York scene's going to be totally different, and you're going to have to produce results, and you're going to have to, like, be really cutthroat.
Why do you think that is?
Oh, man. Some of it, I think, is probably the cost to entry. So you're talking multiples on multiples of associated costs with running a gallery in New York versus Seattle. So I think the pressure is just higher, and so performance matters more.
But you were talking about gatekeeping too.
Yeah, the gatekeeping part, I don't know. But again, I think it probably does come back to you have to perform. And so everyone's trying to hold on to their little piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And like, it's so much more competitive.
Where do you see most of the gatekeeping happening?
It was everywhere. I honestly think that things are shifting and have shifted.
Yeah.
And I think there's enough people like me who have worked our way up and done all the things, and we're a bit like, hang on, why is it this way?
Yeah.
Like, can't we break this open a little bit? And wouldn't it be better for all of us if we were more honest about the business side, about our clients, about the way things work? I know kind of why we got into this mess, and I think a lot of it is around value and trying to create value, and if things feel scarce and rare,
Yeah.
then people will pay more money for them, right?
Because you did say something which I thought was really interesting. You said that the value exchange is broken in the art worlds. What exactly do you mean by that? And why is it broken? For whom?
I think it's broken for everybody. Basically, my entire career, there's been this over-financialization of the art market. We turned art into an asset because we were trying to attract a different class of buyer, right? Not a collector who is interested in preserving culture or supporting the arts or understanding creative health, which is a term that I've been banging on and on about. So we've over-financialized this system and removed what I think is the core value of art, which is ultimately that it makes us feel better and it helps us express our feelings or talk about our feelings or talk about where we are in society. And with the over-financialization, I do think the value exchange got broken because people started to think about this thing as an asset that you could buy and sell and trade and make money off, which is not the point.
I mean,
art.
it's highly illiquid anyway, so.
Completely. I mean, even you look at Paul Allen, right, who had this unbelievable collection, and the sale after his death of his core masterpieces. If you look at the investment and how much money he got out of it, he didn't do any better than he would have if he had put all that money into gold or into the housing market. It does the exact same thing. And people see these huge swings in value, but he held this work for 30 years. So it did very well. But if you tried to sell it along the way, it wouldn't have. And oftentimes you can't sell things. I mean, my favorite thing to say to clients who are like, oh, well, can I buy it for an investment? I'm like, how many Damien Hirsts do you think are sold in a year? And they're like, what do you mean? He sells all the time. And I'm like, no, he doesn't. And in fact, there's a waiting list at every single auction house to sell your Hearst. So if you had a dot painting, like a great dot painting from 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and you called up Sotheby's and said, I've got this amazing one, they'd say, great, we can probably sell it in like 6-7 years.
No way.
Uh-huh. Because there's 10 people in front of you who are also trying to get rid of their. So where I think, well, we've just completely forgotten how additive art/culture, and I mean both in the same breath, right? Art is culture, how important they are to our lives. And you have to look no further than kind of how museums and artists were treated during COVID as a non-essential need, and how much funding is cut from schools in terms of art. Our society just doesn't value it. I mean, we value the guy that never plays basketball for the New York Knicks but sits on the bench. He's more valued in our society than most artists are.
Yeah.
And that feels like a fatal flaw. I mean, that feels like a societal flaw.
Why do you think it's like that?
Why do I think it's like that?
Because I'll tell you where I'm coming from. So, and that like ties into creative health, right? You talk about creative health. You talk a lot also about how making art is hard. It's difficult. So I get the sense that for you, there's something really visceral about art. And I think it would probably be the case for most people if they were able to engage with it. But they don't. They don't, or they can't. And I'm just wondering why that is. Like, why is it so challenging to engage with art on like a deep visceral level? Do you know what I mean? Something I think about a lot is, as kids, we draw all the time, and then one day we stop and we just never really go back to it. Or just like kids who really love drawing above anything else. Yes, they do. Maybe they become artists, but all kids have this, incline to draw. And like, why do we stop? Like, what dies? You know what I mean?
I talk about this all the time, that, if you watch kids, they know how to cope. So, and I always talk about the like 3 pillars of wellness, right? We know about our mental health, we know about our physical health. No one talks about creative health. But if you watch a kid, right, if they're upset about something, you know about it immediately. They scream, they shout, they stomp their feet, they like get it out. They cry. If they're happy, they'll give you the world's biggest hug. They leap. I mean, my 12-year-old still, if he's happy, he like leaps like he's a little sheep. And you're like, what are you doing? Right. That's how you express emotion. So mental health, they actually know how to communicate that. But as they get older, what happens? We get stripped of that as well. They also know about their physical health. So the kids, they move the whole time, right? They run everywhere. They like climb up things. They hang from things. They jump on things. They are like, they naturally know that moving their body is a good thing. And as you say, they also like sit down and build stuff like Lego, right? Is the most popular, it's got to be one of the most popular kids' toys ever. Why? Because they get to build things first following instructions and then out of their own imaginations, right? Or they sit down and they doodle, or they paint and they draw and they like, right? And they all just do this because instinctively they know. And our society, frankly, does a terrible part keeping all those things intact, right? It's why the wellness industry is kind of bigger than the pharmaceuticals companies now, because we're realizing, oh God, actually, we should move our bodies until the bitter end, and we don't. Same with mental health. And I do sort of think that there's a responsibility here for someone to take the lead on creative health and bring it back in. And again, you look at like adult coloring books,
knitting, crochet,
right, like use your hands. But then I think there's this other kind of visual literacy that needs to be built into not just doodling and crocheting and doing all that stuff, but like learning how to look again at things and maybe sit with the mess around. If you look at something and you're like, oh, I don't get it, that just looks like a yellow blob. Okay, it does look like a yellow blob, but like What do you think about something when you're looking at the yellow blob? Like, what happens in your brain? What happens with your neural pathways? What is it like bringing up in you?
Mm.
Irritation, surprise, delight, whatever. What happens when, yeah, you actually experience art? And again, watch a kid look at something and they'll be like, that's just a yellow blob. And you're
Yeah.
like, I know. Do you like it? I don't know. Maybe. Sort of. It looks like a mountain. I think actually it's a mountain. And then all of a sudden these other things come to light. And then you're like, well, actually the artist was referencing mountains. Let's talk about that. And like, let's talk about the whole history of
Yeah.
whatever this artist is trying to do. And it just unlocks a whole bunch of things. But I think that we just do a terrible job going down that particular rabbit hole.
And that's something then you want to encourage with scene.
Yeah. Yeah. So my hope with scene was first really simple. I was just kind of bored of reading press releases and not having access to artists. And it was, again, it kind of happened all by mistake. I did a show for Sky Arts, which was called The Art Show. And I was brought in to do some interviews because I had done an interview series that was online asking like really hard questions of artists, but I was never on camera. And then for the art show, they were like, can you do that? But can you do it on camera? Can you be like the person that's asking the tough questions? And I was like, sure. I mean, talk about like dream commission job. So I got to go like all over the world interviewing artists like Barty Kerr, Nick Cave, McLean Thomas. I mean, it was so cool.
Super cool.
It was amazing. But then when we tried to like recommission it, no one was really into it. And it was more of a magazine show because there was a bit of travel tied into it. And I was like, this is crazy. Like those interviews were amazing. And the interviews we had done online before that, like I'd interviewed Marina Abramovich and Martin Creed, and they were getting, hundreds of thousands of views. But I was like, why do we not have master interviews with artists anywhere? And sure, there are some podcasts that are doing that, but like maybe there's a better way to do it in artist studios. So thought about and conceived of scene as a way to do that. And then I quickly realized that actually we could do like a bit of education. So helping artists understand the difference between the primary market and the secondary market, or explaining to collectors like the hierarchy of artist categories. So what's a blue chip artist versus an emerging artist versus mid-career? And what do those things mean in terms of value? And so Scene became this like kind of 360 platform that I did want it to be a next generation art consultancy, because what I hoped was that by like revealing some of the inner workings of the art world, that it would lead to sales without it being sales forward. I wanted it to be like, oh, through discovery,
more organic.
Yeah. People would get excited and think, actually, that artist is so cool. And they're at the beginning of their career, so maybe I will support them.
So you don't give any advice. There's a curation element to it, obviously, because you select who you're interviewing, or I don't want to say promote, but who's on the platform. So it's indirect, but you'd never say you should buy this artist. Like you don't have that sort of relationship with the collector side of the platform.
Not so much. I mean, we've definitely championed some emerging artists in a much more direct way. So like putting together a PDF and then passing that to clients and saying, you should look at this.
Did you get a commission if the sale happens?
So off that we do.
Yeah.
And we're super transparent about that with collectors. But with bigger artists, right, where we'll just do an interview, we'll then release it in both text format, audio, podcast, visual. The great thing about those is that they have also led to sales, and we don't take a commission there. Someone can come through us and say, hey, can you help? Can you go get that McLean Thomas? And we'll say, sure. But in that case, we'll charge you for our time. Or you can just go straight to the studio or straight to the gallery and say, I'd like a McLean Thomas. So that was the other part of the business plan that I was really, really keen to make sure was intact, was that we weren't taking a commission if we weren't needed. And so if people discover artists on their own and they get excited about them, they can go out and buy that artist without us ever being involved, because I really wanted it to feel like unbiased advice.
I would love to talk a little bit about your curatorial lens. How do you select the artists that you want to present and highlight via
Totally
scene?
on gut. I see something I like, I'll
Yeah.
then spend time with it. So, like, there's one artist who probably for 2 years before I launched Scene, I was watching her, like, talking to her a bit online, emailing a bit, went to see a show, and then finally was like, "Actually, this is amazing, amazing work." I then bought a piece myself and then was like, "Oh my god, we've gotta promote this woman. She is an
What's
unbelievable
her name?
painter, Zena Blackwell." She's a remarkable painter with a really interesting aesthetic and practice, and but like I said, this was a sort of 2-year journey with her
Mm.
that got us to the point where I was like, "Okay, I now feel completely convicted that she's one to watch, has a rigorous practice, isn't gonna go anywhere." And so there's, like, credentials that I have once something's, like, aesthetically grabbed me,
Yeah.
then there's a little checklist that I'll go through,
Yeah.
but there is absolutely no overarching aesthetic.
Okay. So it's a reflection of your personal taste as well then.
Absolutely.
So how do you describe your taste?
Oh god. So, I've intentionally interviewed some artists who I've been like, that's not really work I'd wanna live with." But I wanna interview them to sort of to find out more, to learn a bit about the practice, to, see, like, what this is all about. And then we have obviously ended up championing them because that discovery has changed my opinion of the work. I have no idea. I mean, you're here in my house. There's everything in here, right? There's painting, there's prints, there's photography, there's sculpture. I don't know how I would describe my taste, but it's definitely narrative led. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not an abstract person, and I don't and minimalism to some extent, I'm a bit like, don't get it. I need a story
Yeah.
under the work.
Do you know all the artists that are in your collection?
Personally?
Yeah.
No.
I mean, you have a lot.
Most I do or I've met briefly, but, like, really briefly. So Simonette Cromina, who's the big black and white piece in the dining room, I bought that without ever meeting her
Yeah.
and then met her after because I went in to do an interview with her for Scene.
Has your taste changed over the years, would you say?
Massively, massively. And that's actually the most fun thing about collecting is watching your relationship with work change as you go. So pieces that, really, really spoke to me years ago that now I'm like, "Hmm, I'm not sure." Or so then I'll move them,
Yeah.
right? And then moving them to a new location again completely changes how I feel about them.
But you've never sold anything?
I've never sold anything. Never. Much to my husband's chagrin, right? Because I'll sometimes say to him, I'll be like, "Babe, it's a great investment." And he's like, "It's not an investment. You're never gonna sell them." Like, "Try it on." No.
But one thing also I'm curious about because I speak to collectors, some more seasoned, some more emerging, but who are not art world professionals. You're actually the first one. How does coming from that world, working in that world, being in that world all the time, how does that influence the way you collect?
Oh, man. It's in some ways, it's awful. So, I was just in Miami for Art Basel, and y I sometimes have to, like, shake myself out of my own experience? Maybe I don't even know how to say this, but there was the easiest for instance I can give you. I was walking by a booth and I saw one work that I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. Like, what actually is it?" And it was this crazy sculpture. It was like a 3D sculpture, but it was hanging on the wall like it was a painting, and it had a bit of a, like, industrial feel, really high polish, and then I looked into the booth, and there were 6 or 7 works that were all exactly the same. Like, all that same kind of singular
Mm,
aesthetic, instantly recognizable, and within 3 seconds, I was like, "Nope." The woman who works really closely with me, she's my head of digital strategy, she was like, "Why'd you just say no?" And I said, Because it's all one thing." And that's not good for anybody. She was like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, so if it's all same now,
Mm.
what's it going to be 2 years from now? He's going to probably keep reproducing the same thing. And so for better or worse, right, I immediately dismissed this artist. And on the flight on the way home, I was like, I kind of wish like I had written that artist's name down or the gallery down, because I probably should take a second look because it was so singular. And I am still thinking about it. Now I'm talking to you about it. But I dismissed it based off, it's way too samey. It's way too consistent.
That's funny that you say that, because I feel like that's something people look for, that, instantly recognizable signature almost.
Absolutely, right? Like the artists who, like Damien Hirst, you instantly know
Yeah.
a Damien Hirst because he has 6 or 7 series that are so singular that they could only be done by him. But I think that if that's taken too far, it becomes a negative.
Yeah. It's a fine line.
It's a really, really fine line, right? But my snap judgment there was like, there's too many, and he's already oversaturating his own market, and he's an emerging artist. Like, it's just not going to work. So whether that's fair or not, I mean, it'd be hilarious if in like 10 years we see him everywhere and I'm like, oh, what's wrong about that? Should have bought one.
In your collecting approach, so driven by guts and across mediums, do you think about it long term, like in terms of legacy, or do you have a vision for where you want to take your collection?
No, I think about the kids now for sure. But I've never stopped to think, okay, well, maybe we should build a collection that's works on paper because those are a bit more affordable, or have a, like, I've got a friend who her whole collection, and she realized this after, but she's got an extensive photography collection that is pictures of people but without their faces. So like she's got a theme that she can take to an auction house and say, this is a single owner sale and the work is all about this.
Yeah.
Whereas anyone would get their hands on this and be like, oh, there's no string here except for the Carrie Scott on the mall, which is fine, right? Yeah. Like that's, we have them to live with them, but the children may eventually be like, thanks, Mom.
But especially if they want the same ones, that'd be difficult.
Which they probably will.
In terms of advice that you give to collectors, what do you know as an arts professional that most people who collect or want to collect don't know but should?
There's a couple things. I gave a tour around Art Basel, Miami, at the convention center to a group of people. And one of the gentlemen on the tour was like, can you explain pricing to me? And I said, well, it's a little bit tricky, but there's a formula. And he was like, what? There's a formula. So for paintings in particular, it's math. So it's height by width, and then it's multiplied by cofactors. And those cofactors change. But so it'll be like, how many museum shows has the artist had? 0? Then 0. How many solo shows has the artist had? How many group shows have they been in? How many books are they in? How many sort of proper press clippings or like scholarly articles have been written about them? And the height by width is then multiplied by those cofactors. So for painting, really easy. Works on paper then are a different tier down because they're a slightly more affordable bracket. And then photography is kind of its own field and is much more based off precedent. So looking at if you're releasing a work of a certain size, it should all fit within this general bracket. But at the end of the day, there's math holding this whole thing together that people don't know about. And so you can say to a gallery, sorry, how did you arrive at this price? But it's hilarious, right? Yeah. Why is it not talked about? And this is something that I only learned, right, having been in this industry for 20 years. I didn't learn it when I was working in Seattle. I didn't learn it when I was working in New York. I found out about it like 6-7 years ago. and had the same face that you've got now. I was like, what? This is how we're doing this? I thought it was all like, oh,
Just vibes.
vibes. Yeah, just vibes. No,
Anything else?
I don't look at art as an investment.
Yeah.
But I would never spend more than 10K on a work without 3 things being true.
Okay.
So, and this is controversial and it's going to get me into hot water. 1, I would want to be able to hear the artist speak. Like, I'd want to know that the artist can talk about their work, that there's, even if it's just an artist statement, that there is something I can hang on to that explains the work and is straight from the horse's mouth.
Mm.
This day and age, that shouldn't be hard. Like, you should be able to go and listen to an artist talk about their work. So 1. 2, I would absolutely not spend more than 10K on a work if it's not already in a book. Now, I don't mean like there needs to be a monograph on the artist published, but there are so many survey books, and I'm pointing at them because we're sitting in our sort of library area, but like there's so many survey books, African State of Mind, Art Annotated. There's so many books out there that do show you not quite emerging artists, but like breaking artists, artists who are well respected in the art world, and their work will be in them. So I would like want to. I'd say, hey, has this work ever been, or has this artist ever been included in any books?
Yeah. So not necessarily like a solo show, but at least a book. Yeah.
And then that's the other one, is that I would say, and what about exhibition history? Have they shown before? And where have they shown?
A group show or
Solo
solo
for 10K.
for 10K.
Yeah. And I think that kind of is standard. Now, during COVID, our ultra contemporary, so ultra contemporary is the term the art world uses to describe anyone that's born after 1975. The ultra contemporary pricing went mental. And so that wouldn't be true. But that bubble burst badly, right? Badly, badly, badly. And lots of collectors who bought work there are now holding work that is overinflated still. So that rule would have fallen apart then, but it also would have saved you from overpaying for an emerging artist.
Okay. That's really good tips. And if someone is just starting out, right? Let's say they have, I don't know, £1,000 saved and they want to start building a collection in a meaningful way, where should they start?
Scene, obviously. No, in all seriousness, right? Like, find voices and platforms like ours. So Danielle, oh gosh, what is her last name? This woman started a blog back in the days of blogs called The Jealous Curator. And it is exactly as it sounds. Like, she was jealous of the work being made. She's also an artist. And so she started this blog, and she champions artists who range from sort of $200 all the way up to 200,000, and is still what she does. And she's fabulous. So there are people like me who look at the full scale and will show you those emerging artists who are affordable as well as the sort of blue chip ones. I think auction houses are another great place to start, even though the price points there might be pretty high. I think you start to learn about editions, which is obviously a more affordable place to start.
Would you recommend editions?
I would. Yeah. I think, well, so long as the edition is kind of under 25. I think editions are great. I think photography is great.
Under 25.
You don't want to buy.
If there's more than 25 out there.
No.
Why not? Why 25?
So artists will do 1 in 25, 1 in 50, or 1 in like 150. And when you have an artist who's doing an edition, it again usually means that there are multiple works in a series that can be editioned. So that edition of, say, 50, then if you start thinking about maybe there's 50 works that can be editioned 50 times,
right?
All of a sudden, you're getting, it's watered down, right? So smaller editions always better. There's an amazing new auction platform called Auctionet, who, full disclosure, I am working with, but I'm only working with them because I think they're fabulous. And they are an aggregate of lots of like 60, actually, I think they own 80 auction houses worldwide, but they're the smaller auction houses.
Yeah.
So the regional ones you've kind of never heard of, like Lots Road, which is a remarkable auction house here in London. And you'll find like works on paper there by Picasso that are undervalued because they're at these regional auction houses. So I think looking at auction houses that are not Sotheby's,
Yeah.
Christie's, Bonhams, Phillips,
Yeah.
right? Those are the big four. You can really unearth some treasures.
You've worked in the industry for 20 years. What are the challenges that you see today that young collectors have to contend with compared to when you first started out?
I think for collectors, it's easier now, right? There is more transparency. So really, if you're doing your homework, you're not going to get led down the garden path, I don't think. But that does mean that you have to do your homework. And it's really important to find people that you trust and you want to work with. So whether that is, you like a gallery's aesthetic and you start to make a relationship with the gallery, or whether that is you find an art consultant who can help you kind of navigate, or you're on your phone looking on Instagram and you're seeing artists who you think are great and you build a relationship with them. The key to all of this always has been relationships, right? And so I think that because we're more connected now, collectors have an easier time of removing some of those gatekeeping mechanisms that have been in place for so long, and are in a unique position to be able to ask more questions of things.
Even though it can be hard to take that first step and start asking the questions, you kind of have to make yourself. Because you're always worried. I mean, that's how I feel anyway, that, you're just going to sound dumb.
Yeah. Listen, it is really hard. And I don't know why, but right, like you walk into a shop and the pricing is on an object. So you're like, oh, I can afford that, or I can't afford that. I'd need to leave. And I think it's still crazy that galleries don't just say, this is how much this costs. Let's just start with that as the bare minimum, so that we all know, oh, okay, that's really an aspirational. I love that artwork, but it's way out of my price range. And you are seeing galleries like Unit London, their pricing is front and center. And so everyone knows where they stand, and that's great, right? But I think that if the art world could just make that one switch, I think it would stop any of us feeling slightly intimidated when we go into these spaces.
I kind of want to ask you about collector responsibility. I interviewed a collector a few weeks ago, and she talked a lot about the cultural discourse and how collectors contribute to that, have a responsibility to engage with it and contribute to it. Do you agree?
100%. 100%. I think then this comes back to like, what is the true value of art?
Yeah.
We are preserving culture. Art history is, living in our lifetime, and it's so important that we preserve voices that, well, actually, just that we preserve voices. Full stop. I joke about our collection, which is teeny tiny compared to like a proper. We are not collectors. We have collected as a occupational hazard. But I have a spreadsheet somewhere that, some lawyers have, my husband has. It's also printed out and in our safe. And it gives every artist's name, a link to their bio, a link to the gallery that represents them. I then also have scanned like the certificates of authenticity. And I didn't do that based on, oh God, I think that the value of this collection is going to be huge one day. I did it more so that if someone comes along and wants to do a giant retrospective for Storm Tharp, they like know that, one, our Storm Tharp is legit, two, when it was acquired and who it was acquired from, so there's a provenance, and three, so that it can go to a museum and sit there as like in a authoritative piece as part of his catalog raisonné.
Yeah.
And that, I feel, is my responsibility to the artist to make sure that all of that legacy is, one, easily accessed, and two, part of their story, right? I'm a custodian of yeah, their work. So I think it is really important, to treat everything with the utmost value, because, again, not because of one day it might be worth something, but one day that voice
Yeah.
might have resonance far further than you can anticipate now.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. You also talked about, I remember in one of the interviews, about the importance of artists in fixing or helping to fix the polarized society we live in. I mean, that's not exactly what you said, right? But it was along those lines that I understood it. And I feel like that responsibility contributes to that. I agree with you, but I also think it's a huge burden to put on artists alone. So how can we, support them in that process? And like partially is through understanding the importance of engaging with the current discourse.
Artists aren't political, but they're capturing time and place, and which therefore makes all art political in some way, right? And I do think that right now we've got this crazy polarized society worldwide, right? It's one or the other, and
Yeah.
there's very little in the middle. And I do think artists live in that middle, muddy, messy space that's like, I'm not sure what the answer is here, but I'm going to sit in the questioning. And so, like, by hook or by crook, we've got to protect them and help that part of our cultural, like, story live. It makes it sound so like we're on a mission. But I I just think it's incredibly important.
Okay, just a couple more questions. How would you describe your collection in one word?
Can I do a hyphenated word?
Go for it.
Storytelling. It's not really a hyphenated word. Storytelling. I'd go with storytelling. Tells a story.
You mean each work or
E
together it
each
tells?
work.
Yeah.
Each work. I don't think together it tells anything, but maybe someone could pull back and tell me, actually, Carrie, the whole thing is this.
What's the last piece you purchased?
Eva Gold, I guess, from Rose Easton. It's a light piece that I saw at Frieze last year. And it's by a young artist, called Eva Gold, who's amazing, does installation-based work. I think that is the last piece. She's awesome. No, I'm lying. Eva Dixon. I knew I was forgetting. Eva Dixon, who is a young, super exciting artist who I discovered during Frieze this year,
Yeah.
but met her literally on the door of another fair, satellite fair called Echo. I think I couldn't find my pass. She and I started talking. I loved her whole vibe. She's like 20, super young. And I was like, what do you do? She's like, I'm an artist. I was like, oh, cool. Is your art inside? And she said, no, it's at this other fair called Minor Attractions. And I said, oh, I'm going there later. I'll look out for it. Saw it at Minor Attractions and loved it. And she had a black and white image of someone's bum with a dart or several darts that like punctured the glass.
Yeah.
So
Was it a painting?
no, it's a photograph with this like sculptural element, which I thought was really cool. So I asked her to send me some other work, and that little collage piece over there is hers. And then she did a solo show that I went to and had no business buying any work at all. But she'd done a piece that uses, the straps you use to like put across freight.
Yeah.
Those big like
Belts.
those belts, exactly. She had used those in several works and like weaved them together. And I thought they were gorgeous. And she'd created this whole narrative around space travel and women. And she's really cool.
Who's a collector you look up to?
Oh, man. Oh, that's so hard. I love the way Nicola Ernie, who I do know very well, I love the way she collects because she collects in depth. For the last 13 years, 11 years, she's been trying to build the biggest private collection of photography, which she will then gift to the city of Zug.
Yeah, we didn't talk about this, but you love photography, right? You're very fond of
photography. But when she buys an artist, she buys 20, 30 pieces so that she can tell a whole story across an archive. She has more Basquiat than anyone in the world and was buying Basquiat before that archive mattered. And whereas lots of collectors will buy the hero work by an artist and then another hero work by an artist, she decided to really go deep and kind of understand their full practice. And I love that, and really support living artists.
Yes. A patron.
Yeah, she's a proper patron.
That's cool.
Yeah,
awesome.
She's cool.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel like I went on and on and on and on. That's my Miami brain.
I could go on. But we'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's it for today's episode of The Collector's Corner. If you enjoyed it, do follow the show and leave a short rating or review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It really helps more people find these conversations. And if you've got thoughts, feedback, or someone you think I should talk to next, I'd love to hear from you. Just drop me a message on Instagram or through the website, thecollectorscornerpodcast.com. Thank you for listening and for being part of this growing community. Until next time.